Hey everyone, Dr. Alex here, and welcome to another episode of the Better Ever After podcast. This is episode 39, and in this episode, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking about a mindset, a way of thinking that I hope is going to help you enjoy your life a bit more and enjoy your accomplishments a bit more and make you subsequently happier by changing the way that you measure your goals and measure your accomplishments and make sure that you're staying out of the gap. So the content we're going to be talking about today, I'm borrowing from actually a local Torontonian, Dan Sullivan, strategic coach. I read this in one of his ebooks that he released. I'm going to make sure there's a link to that wherever you're viewing this content. So what I want to do today is go over what it talks about to see if this might be applicable to you and just give a general overview, because I think you're going to end up wanting to read the ebook for yourself, where you're going to get a few more details out of it, and so you can have a better understanding of some of the background, the execution, and the knowledge to help you with this. So if you are the type of person like me that has had trouble enjoying their accomplishments in the past, having a success but not feeling that great about it, or if you are, relatively successful but sometimes don't feel that way, then this podcast is going to be really helpful to you, because what your problem and what my problem up until this point has definitely been is that I keep measuring myself against the horizon. So what Dan Sullivan talks about is the gap versus the gain. And he talks about if you have a goal on a graph and you draw this graph and you start here and your ideal is to end up here, but you're only here right now. The gap is the area between where you are versus your ideal versus the gain, which is where you are versus you started. And so the analogy that he makes is that if you're measuring where you are versus the ideal, it's like measuring yourself against the horizon. If you're in a boat, you're never going to reach it. The horizon is something that you can always be chasing. It's not a specific destination, and it's something that every other boat on the water can also be chasing. And that when we are in the gap and when we're looking towards the horizon, when we're looking towards accomplishing an ideal, something like, I want to be the best in my field, or I want to have a great relationship with my partner, or I want to be the fastest cyclist in the city. When you measure yourself against this non-specific ideal, it's impossible to reach it because it's not specific and the ideal keeps shifting. And it's an area that's going to make you really unsatisfied, and it's going to make you really unhappy with yourself, because there's never going to be that feeling of accomplishment even though you have relatively accomplished a lot. And so this is something that I have 100% experienced in my life, measuring myself towards some sort of ideal. And having ideal is important, as he talks about, because when you have ideals, it sheds light onto newer and bigger goals. So you always want to have a bigger and better ideal. You want to be a better chiropractor or a better father, a better husband, a better partner. You want to be better at everything there is in your life. But if you keep measuring yourself against that ideal, against that horizon, never going to happen. Really good recipe for being unhappy. And I'm sure there's probably some people in your life that you know, hopefully not you, but some people in your life that are incredibly successful, incredibly wealthy, but are not that happy people because they're not able to enjoy their accomplishments. Versus contrasting that of staying out of that gap and staying in the gain. And the gain is where we want to be. The gain is measuring yourself backwards, not forwards, always backwards of where you've come from. Because when you always measure backwards, when you're in that gain, you're going to see how far you've come. You're going to understand all that it took to get there, and it's going to be a much happier place to be. Because when you measure backwards, you can always see how far you've come and just the gains that you've made. And so whether you're measuring backwards from your childhood or from different points, you can always set a different spot that you're going to measure against. versus if you're shooting for the horizon, it's always this unachievable, non-specific point that you're looking for. When you measure backwards, you can be really, really specific and objective about where you started and how far you've come. So when it comes to goal setting, what we want to do is we know we want to have specific, achievable, measurable goals. And this is a specific example or mindset of a way to think about that. So if we're going to talk about something related to our health or our family, we want to make sure that our goals are really specific. So if your goal is to be a really good partner in your relationship, that's a really nice ideal, but you're going to have something specific and measurable. You're going to have to say it means having X number of date nights a week, or doing the dishes for your partner X number of times a week, or something really specific that is going to be measurable so that you can look back and say, hey, how did I do this week? Or hey, how did I do over the last year? And you'll be able to be objective about it. And when you can do that, you're probably going to see some gains, and you're probably going to be more able to be joyful and happy about it. And if you didn't see any gains, if you weren't happy, at least you have an objective perspective. It's not your emotional brain trying to figure out where you are versus the horizon. At least you know, if you're not meeting your goals, where probably things went wrong and where there's some room for improvement. And so in my life, my recent example was I did my first bike race in May, and I thought I was going to get dropped. I thought I was going to get crushed, and it ended up coming fourth. And as I rode across the finish line, there was a split second where I said, oh, I was so close to the podium. I was so close to being third. And luckily, I had recently read this ebook, and I told myself to shut the you-know-what up. And I recognized that my gain was that I didn't think I was even going to finish this race, and ended up doing really, really well. And it was my first race, so very happy about that. And so I could have measured myself against that ideal of first or the podium, but I, in the moment, chose to measure myself against the gain that I had made. And so this is something that I continually am working on right now, and that I think I'm going to have to work on for the rest of my life, because most of us, when we grew up, we were taught to have gap-like thinking, either from society or our parents. And whether you've thought this way the rest of your life, or your previous life, or not, it doesn't really matter. Now you have this opportunity to flip the switch, to measure backwards, to measure your gains instead of measuring against an ideal. And if you can execute on this, I think it's going to make you a lot happier and able to enjoy your accomplishments, and is going to make you more enjoyable to be around and a better team leader if you're in a leadership role, because you're not going to be frustrated, you're not going to be unhappy, you're not going to be depressed and anxious. So I hope, guys, that this shed a little bit of light, maybe onto a mindset or a topic that you weren't really aware of. I know for me, reading this, it was definitely an eye-opener. And so if you want that content, I will make sure that the link is there. Go read that ebook and start applying this right away, even today. If there is something that you are frustrated or depressed or upset about, make sure that if it's something you're comparing in your mind, that it's not a comparison to an ideal or not a comparison to somebody else, that you're measuring backwards from where you started. And in next week's episode, we're going to talk about something that's in this ebook as well, but something specific and a different tool or different strategy that I'm starting to use, and that I think that you should use on a daily basis to change the way that your brain works and to change your mindset when it comes to this topic. So, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. I will see you very soon, and make sure you stay out of the gap and in the gain.